Welcome to episode number 257, Who Are You? This week marks a 5-year anniversary of this podcast, and I'm so grateful for you as an audience. I know that I have many great listeners and some fans, as I hear from you every so often. As an announcement, this podcast will eventually have a sister podcast translated into Spanish. Now, I had attempted this previously, but my skills as a translator lacked significant education. But I have a wonderful translator now who will provide for the Spanish version. And hopefully we will see this in the next couple of weeks. And I hope that it will provide or help our Hispanic friends who suffer the same way we do. And I also recognize the difficulties in the United States right now and the anxiety and depression that must accompany some of those immigration policies. My heart goes out to my brothers and sisters who struggle to survive not just financially, but because of their nationality. Who are you? That question has deep meaning to us as human beings. We have a deep need to feel included, belonging, and most of all, identity. We need to know who we are and our place in the craziness we call mortality. We actually spend a good portion of our early life determining our identity, only to likely rip it apart and rework it regularly. And identity is perhaps our greatest emotional need. With identity comes desire, motivation, direction, character, and everything we really are as human beings. So today we are going to look at identity. First, through the lens of the scriptures, starting with Lehi's version of the Tree of Life. Now, as we look and you study this dream of Lehi, we begin to see various characters emerge from this large field that seemingly was a world containing the souls of the earth. What we first notice is that these individuals are already grown, and they seem to have some direction towards the rod of iron. This is the first thing we note about their identity. A portion, and perhaps a large portion, of the identity of the people has already been developed at this point. These are individuals ready to learn and to choose based on what they feel and know. We learn that they are pressing forward to find the rod of iron, but we also learn just a little later in the story that some are far more motivated than others to find that rod. Some seem easily distracted, while others are simply determined to find other paths. So these people do not come to the rod with the same spiritual nature. Otherwise, we would see about the same result for every person. Much of what we see in this dream can only be explained by assuming that the individuals in the dream already have a significant foundation of knowledge. They know about the rod, at least in a deep emotional sense, and we tend to call this the light of Christ. They know the direction to the rod, and again, they seem to be motivated. Now, as this press of individuals nears the rod, we then see the mists of darkness arise. A mist shouldn't really cause great concern in the sense of finding the rod. Yes, the rod is not going to be visible for long distances, but it also appears that a path has been established to get there. The mist would be somewhat concerning depending upon the strength of your conviction to get to the rod. So we really shouldn't see as much trouble as we do when these mists arise. These mists seem to be some type of sorting system for the individuals and their nature. It seems to give each their identity in relation to the tree of life. The mists are stated to be the temptations of the devil. We shall call them distractions rather than temptations, although temptation does bring about ideas of emotional connection to them. Once this group, that appears to be mostly together, comes upon the mists, the sorting begins actually almost immediately. This again reinforces the idea that these individuals are coming to the mists, to the head of the fountain, with already developed characters and natures. They quickly begin the sorting process by choosing their identity. Initially, we see 3 identities emerge. Those feeling their way to the rod and using the rod to find and partake of the tree. Those who are feeling their way to the great and spacious building, and those who take hold of the rod but lose interest and conviction and begin to play in the murky water that runs along the path. What we find initially is the direct separation into 2 groups, though. One group whose feelings for the rod and the tree were never really developed, and another determined to find the rod and the tree. The building people seem always to be building people, almost as if their nature and their choices before this life would never really allow them to accept the gospel. They feel the pull of the building and those people already in that building, and they then feel their way to that building. There exists no discussion that they ever really sought the rod of iron, only the building. And it was their nature that caused this separation before the head of the waters, so that they would be on the other side of the river, searching for the building. The second group of individuals who find the rod and begin to split into another set of identities. We find individuals distracted by the diversion of playing in the waters, rather than walking the path. Recreation holds their attention because they can always walk to the tree. The rod is just right up the hill, but the banks are muddy and slick, and time passes quickly until the path is no longer accessible, and they wind up drowning in the waters of the river. They can never really remove the longing for the water and the muddy river, and time just runs out on their days of recreation and probation, and they never really find the tree. So now, in these splits, in these identities, we have the building people and the river people. This rod of iron group continues to hold fast and to find and partake of the tree. These are those who hold fast, obtain a testimony, live the gospel, find a relationship with Christ, and truly continue the conversion process. Now, once you're at the tree, the mists seem to clear a little, and now you can see the first group who split off. They are living what appears to be a very lavish life. It doesn't look at all like the Lord is punishing them for their wickedness. If anything, they look blessed. It is here where we find the final major identity classification, the wanderer. The individual always searching for new paths, new adventures, and attempting to find an alternate tree that provides everything the original does without the needed rigorous religious doctrine. These individuals see the building and the tree and find some shame that the tree isn't as beautiful as the building. And so they seek an alternative, something between the two, and are never really able to find anything. Lehi calls them lost on strange roads. So now we have the four major identities that the Lord identifies on the earth. The building people, the river people, the wanderers, and what we are going to call the tree people. Each has distinguishing characteristics in nature, and we find some crossover in each of us. We all have a little bit of those identities within us. I have no doubt you have probably felt them. What we are attempting to do is simply remove the identities of the other three opposing and become converted tree people. Why are these identities so important? Why does it matter? Because they reveal the true nature and perspective of identity. We can have identity in many ways, and we can define it in many ways. We do, but the reality of life and the gospel tells us that these four identities are what is real in the sense of an identity. Most of the identities of the world are wrapped up in the three opposing identities to the tree people, and those identities are wrapped into the mortal world. Some identify with material things like the building people. Some individuals identify with experiences, such as the river people, and others identify with a mixture of worldly ideas and mortal, flawed science that leaves them always searching for the truth, but never really able to find it. These are the wanderers. Interestingly enough, we find the same four identities in the parable of the sower. However, in that parable, we find what is truly motivating their actions. When you consider that parable of the sower, you will see those who never allowed the seed of the gospel to enter their lives. The birds came and ate the seeds. These are the no-seeders. Then you see the partial seeders who didn't last because of a lack of endurance. The next group you see in the parable of the sower are the seeders, but one is weeded out by worldly weeds. The other group produces seed. What we see is identical to the tree of life. The building people are the no-seeders. They never really obtained and planted the seed. They allowed it to be eaten and saw it of little value. The partial seeders are the river people. They simply don't endure the rod of iron and get lost in the experience and the recreation of the world. The weedy seeders are those who are lost in strange roads, the wanderers, and you know who the final group is. What we see from the Lord is four specific identities that emerge from the field before the mists. This likely means that those four identities are eternal in nature rather than just mortal. We likely already had most of our path determined before we came into mortality, not by the Lord, but by our own choices. This doesn't mean that mercy and grace can't make up the difference, because they can. It just means that we are not likely to choose mercy and grace when we find ourselves in those three opposing identities. When you look at the identities and the focus, we find that while the rod, the river, and the building are important, the focus of all the identities are around the tree. Finding the tree, eating from the tree, and remaining loyal to the tree. If we base our identity on anything but this tree, who is the Savior, and his knowledge of us, we will find ourselves sitting in a building, playing in a river, or wandering on strange paths. What is interesting is that the joy and happiness we are seeking through our identities only comes from the fruit of the tree. You can't get it anywhere else. When we base our identity on anything but the Savior and his revelation for us and our relationship, we are lying to ourselves, and we are taking upon ourselves alternate identities. So, how do you remain a tree people when your identity is based on your feelings, but your feelings don't match your true identity? One, you have to understand that your true identity is not the feelings produced by your illness, and that takes time and practice to do. Two, you ask the Savior to help you to see what your true identity is. I have found in my experience that he will allow you to see it clearly. It doesn't mean that it's going to remain with you always, but the Lord can help you to see who you truly are on a regular basis. The one thing you should know is that you are of the tree people. While you might feel like a river or a building person, and you might even feel like you're wandering, but I know you are of the tree people. This covering that is your illness is not you. And when it is removed, you will find a wonderful, happy, loving person on the other side. Your illness may not allow you to see who you truly are, but the Savior can do this. However, it is important that we ask him. And I fully believe you will find a wonderful person under your illness. This illness, while severely difficult in nature, causes such a change of nature in such a rapid way in our hearts. It is a gift, although I know that it feels like an ever-increasing weight trying to drown you. And that is the purpose of your illness, to change your nature in ways that you might never be able to in any other way. The question that the Savior asked is identical for us, and the answer is also identical. There is no other way for us to be exalted but through our illness. Our illness is the catalyst of our exaltation in many ways, and while it is difficult to see now, one day you and I will be very grateful for what we have. So until that day, hold on to what you have, and the riches of eternity will be yours. Until next week, do your part so that the Lord can also do his.